everybody. This is Mr. McCormac. And Mr. McCormac and I are friends. We met each other. Come on in, ladies. Right here. Mr. McCormac and I met each other last year. Goes to almost all the home OCC football games, and we met at a football game early in the year last year. And what happened was, Mr. McCormac was wearing his hat, and I went up to him because I'm a history teacher, and I had just said to my class that day, somebody said they couldn't do something. And I said to him, "Are you telling me you can't do something?" I said, "What do you think the soldiers from World War II said when they were in high school, because they just finished high school, do you think any of them ever said, 'I can't do this'?" And they said, "Well, maybe, probably not." I said, "Exactly, they never said, 'I can't.'" And that day, that was a Friday, and that night, I saw Mr. McCormac there, and I told him that story. And then I said to Mr. McCormac, "Would you want to come in and speak to my kids about your experiences? Because we can tell all kinds of stories about World War II, but they don't compare to somebody who lived it. Just like anything in history, you can tell a lot of stories about history, but you can't compare to the experience of somebody who's lived it." And Mr. McCormac, of course, being the kind of person that he is, he said, I don't know how much I have to tell those kids. Well, guess what? After he spoke last year, he had a lot to tell them, and they were very appreciative of what he had to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McCormac. He's going to talk to you about some things. Today is Mr. McCormac's, and he wouldn't tell you this, but I will. Today is Mr. McCormac's 97th birthday. And guess what? You never know. Never know.
I'm still standing.
He's one of the sharpest guys I know, and it's a pleasure to have you, and it's all yours, Mr. McCormac.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come here. On December 7, 1941, we were bombed by the Japanese Air Force at Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt said this was a day of infamy. This bombing killed 2,000 of our servicemen, 200 planes were destroyed, and 6 battleships were sunk. This was the entrance of the United States of America into what is called World War II. Immediately, men throughout our country went out to join the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. But this was not enough to fight this war. Hence, the government initiated the draft. This meant that all men 18 to 45 had to sign up for this draft. Every man was assigned a 3-digit number. When this number was shown in newspapers or announced on the radio, you had to report to your draft board for duty. This cost me 3 years of my life. My number came up and I had to report to New Cumberland, Pennsylvania on December 18, 1942. There I was fitted with my uniform. Then we were to get our necessary shots to prevent disease. We had to back into a room and we received these shots on the same time in both arms. I was immediately assigned to KP duty, which is working in the kitchen all day. It happened to be Christmas Day. And fortunately, my mother, father, sister, and girlfriend came to visit me. This was a good excuse to relieve me of my duty in the kitchen. I was chosen to serve in the Army Signal Corps, not the infantry. I was glad of that. I was sent to Camp Edison, Seagard, New Jersey, basic training. My drill sergeant was movie actor Billy Hallop. Maybe you don't remember him. He was the leader of the gang in the movie Dead End Kids. This show was later shown on TV. Camp Edison was situated right on the beach of the Atlantic Ocean. In December, the weather was extremely cold, so cold that we had to wear our uniforms to bed. It was that cold that my toothpaste was frozen in the morning. I stayed here about 2 months. Then I moved to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, to study radio communications. Of course, it was still cold, and while I was walking back from class, going back to my barracks, my ear started to hurt, and I couldn't imagine what it was, so I went to the infirmary. The medic checked me and said, "That's frostbite." He said, "It's a good thing you didn't bend your ear, it would have broken off." It was cold. I stayed in Fort Monmouth about 2 months. I was then sent to Camp Murphy, Florida, which is in Hollywood, Florida, for radar training for 3 months. Here on our free time, we could go just across the street to the beach. We had lots of fun there, throwing helmets up to knock down the coconuts from the palm trees. We'd break them with our coconut, with our helmets, and then share the pieces with everybody. Once in a while, we'd go in the water. It was fun. It was more fun than any other place I was in. Our next move was Camp Crowder in Joplin, Missouri, to study communications. We stayed here for about 2 months. Then we boarded a troop train to Camp Pendleton near San Francisco, California. While we were out sightseeing one day, we were standing in the middle of the Oakland Bay Bridge, and a Piper Cub comes down. It looked like it was going to come right at us. He was coming right to where we were standing, and he immediately went under the bridge and out the other side. I don't think you can fly that under the bridge anymore. They've stopped that. After 1 month at this camp, we boarded another train, but had no idea where we were going. We thought we were going to the South Pacific to the war in Japan, but no. We zigzagged across the country so that no one could detect where we were going, not even us. We wound up in Massachusetts at Camp Miles Standish to board the ship to Europe. After a couple of days at sea, which was not a thing to write home about, some of the meals were horrible. One morning, if you can believe it, they had raw bacon and sour beets for breakfast. Anybody ever have that? No McDonald's or Wawa out there. We loaded onto trucks and headed south in the southern tip of England. At this time, we knew nothing about D-Day. We loaded into the landing craft and set sail across the English Channel to France. We landed at Omaha Beach. The first troops landed here on June 6, 1944, which was D-Day. We landed here on June 12th, 1 week later. The Germans were still shooting at us from the high of the cliffs above the beach. We walked all night and arrived at the town of St. Mary-Glise, which had already been bombed several times. Here we met the First Army Commander, General Omar Bradley. We were then attached to the 7th Corps Signal Battalion, who had been training in Iceland. We were assigned a truck full of communication equipment and a driver. We were to maintain communications from the front lines back to the generals. What we saw that day was something to behold. It's hard to believe, but the aircraft came over, they cleared a path for us to go into Belgium and Germany, but there were so many planes that you could not see the sky. This went on for over an hour. There's nothing but airplane up there. It was a precise speeding, bombing, because they ruined everything on the side of the road, but never damaged any roads which we were going to use to go into Germany. In a short time, my driver's wife became ill and died. He was sent home immediately. I became the equipment operator and also the driver. Up till this time, I had never driven a truck or a car. It didn't take long. The war must go on. If it doesn't work in one gear, you put it in another one. It's simple. I drove through France, Belgium, and into Germany. It was raining heavily, and the roads were muddy. I had to put down the windshield because I could not see. I put on goggles and drove through Germany, just like the last Kentucky Derby. They put on goggles too. They weren't fighting a war, I was. We were attached to the 4th Infantry Division and also 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne under the leadership of General Omar Bradley. When we first entered Germany at Aachen, we were booed by the civilians. Shortly after this began the Battle of the Bulge. This was the Germans' last attempt to push us back to the English Channel, so they thought. By now it began to snow heavily. It was almost Christmas Day, and on all holidays the Army always treated us very well. We had a turkey dinner with all the trimmings. I ate my dinner on my snow-covered truck fender. We finally made it back to Germany, but this time the civilians clapped for us because the Germans were losing at this time. While driving through Germany, I was pleasantly surprised by a visit by my best friend from my grammar school days. We didn't know we were so close to each other, but by communications, we met in Heidelberg, Germany. This man became, his name was Bill Sands, he became my best man. While monitoring the communications, we were told that Germans were wearing our uniform, so beware. That night a knock came to the back door of my truck. I quickly grabbed my rifle, kicked open the door. It was my buddy from the next truck. Good thing I didn't shoot. On our way through Germany, we had to dodge bombs on and off all night long. We found a cement bunker. Instead of being in the truck, we thought we were apt to be shot or bombed or something. We went into a cement bunker. It was so small. The two of us were in there, but if you wanted to turn around during the night, you say, let's turn around. So you did it in unison. A cement bunker, we found plenty of refuge, but we lay there at night and you could hear the bombs coming. Oh, there's one. There's another one's getting closer. They're getting closer. The next one was past us. Good, we made that one. That was every night we had to put up with that. But when we went outside in the morning, all the homes around their developments were all bombed, but we were safe. We moved across Germany for a while. We came upon a concentration camp, which had been just liberated. This was Dachau concentration camp. This is part of the Holocaust. There were many still in the camp that were able to take their bikes and go home. But when they got home, they were not welcome because Germany was losing. There were many inmates dead from cremation or starved to death. We got the German civilians to come in and help to dispose of their bodies. They dig a long trench, must have been a half a block long. The civilians had to pick up each one of them and put them in that grave. The last one was a little baby, and we all stood there and gave credit to all of them to lay the baby to rest. After this, the war ended in May 1945. I arrived home by ship in October 1945. We went to Camp Fort Meade, Maryland, where I was discharged. I boarded a train, arrived at North Philadelphia train station, where I was met by my father, mother, sister Marie, and girlfriend. In a short time, I went to take my civilian driver's test. Imagine, I drove over a couple 100 miles through France, Belgium, and into Germany. But when I took my civilian test, I flunked. I thought I was right, but he said I was wrong. It was a two-line on the test ground. It was a two-lane highway, and I was going up the hill. And I couldn't see what was going to come over the top of the hill. So the state trooper said, "Pass that car." I said, "No, sir." And I kept going. And he said, I said, "Pass that car." I said, "No, sir." He said, "Why don't you pass it?" I said, "I don't know what's coming over the other side of the hill, so I could have an accident." I thought you were tricking me. He said, we don't play games here. So I went back 2 weeks later, and I passed the test. No problem. By now, my girlfriend and I began to plan our wedding. It took us 6 years to get to this point. We had gone to each other's senior prom. That was in 1939 and 40. We decided to wait for the war to end before we would marry. We were married on February 23rd, 1946. We were married 1 month short of 70 years. My wife died on January 21st, 2016. We had 7 children. Some of them are here today. I brought some memorial items from the war. If you care to see them, they're up here on the table. Thank you for listening. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have if I can answer them. I don't think I'll have many more trips back to school here. You see, 97, there's not many more years left. He's taken care of me so far. And thank you, Mr. Bristol. And thank you, class, for listening to me. It's a pleasure.
Question for you. Anything you want to ask Mr. McCormac, especially, you know, it doesn't even have to be about the war. You're talking about a man who's lived many decades. And I was asking him some questions earlier, but how about you guys? What's some questions you want to ask Mr. McCormac? Don't be shy. Only takes one to open the doors. Somebody's get it rolling for us. Jimmy, ask him a question.
Me?
Yeah, come on.
What was high school like back then?
That's a good question, Jim.
But
What was high school like
What was
back
high school
then?
like for you? Was it how different was high school for you than it is, you think, today? For these kids?
I always think we had it tougher than it do today.
So, not much.
Yeah.
What was tougher about it? A little more discipline?
Oh, a lot more discipline. Yes.
Okay.
That's what's missing today. Sorry. Sorry.
No. I'm pretty easy on them, right, guys? Okay. I keep them in line when I have.
That's good. That's good.
They're lucky I can't hit them.
You spent that time.
I know, I told them when I was in high school. They
Yeah,
did
right.
So,
Sometimes you get a ruler over your knuckles.
yeah. Yeah. Josh's hands would be bleeding.
So,
Madison, yeah.
before you went to war, did you have like an ideal like job or career you wanted to do instead of?
I worked for Philco. I don't know whether you ever heard of the Philco Radio and Television. I worked for them. I was an inspector of parts. They go into radio or television.
How about,
I could do it.
how about after the war, Mr. McCormac? What did you do after that? Did you go back to that?
Yes, we had you had to take your I mean, I was told by the government you had to take them back, whoever worked there before the war.
Okay.
I worked there for a while, and I retired at an early age, 62. And I still had family, so they were going to college, so I went back. I worked in a state store, Pennsylvania State Store, for 7 years. So I'm double dipping. Yeah.
What was your first thought after the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
What was your first thought after the bombing of Pearl Harbor? How did you feel? What was your thought about that?
Figure how close was it going to come to me, that's all. You worry about yourself, I know.
And did you volunteer for the service?
I was drafted.
You were drafted, that's right, you said that, okay. But you were ready to go, right?
I was ready to go. I was glad I went, and so glad to come home too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anybody else? How about, we were talking about some of the things, I was asking Mr. McCormac about some of the things that he remembered besides the war itself, some of the early memories that he had in history that he can recall from his memory. And one of the first things that he remembers, and some of the things that I thought was pretty interesting. You told me that you remembered the stock market crash.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, we
29,
1929. You know, you think about these things as students in history, that's a long, you know, we can't even understand how long ago that was, and here he remembers it. And then we talked about the bank robbers of the 30s. He remembers those. Now, these are all things we studied a long time ago in history. And we talked about baseball.
I love baseball.
And he was Philadelphia A's.
Right. That was my favorite.
And who was the
Shaq Park? Was that Shaq
Yeah.
Park?
Connie Mack,
Connie Mack was the manager.
Lefty Grove.
Oh, yeah,
Tell him who you saw play that played on the Yankees. You saw him play.
Babe Ruth.
Saw Babe Ruth play.
Ted Williams play.
Legends that we, you know, can't even imagine before our time that we've seen. Pretty cool.
Did you come across any other like like you said, the actor that you was your general or whatever? Did you come across any other like athletes or anything during your course of war?
Did you meet any other athletes?
Any other athletes or celebrities during your? No. I know a lot of the baseball players were stationed in the Pacific.
Eisenhower, I saw General Eisenhower.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah.
And Omar Bradley, right?
Oh, my brother, yeah.
More questions? Don't be shy, yes.
Hey, Dad, the USO, do you have any recollection of that in World War II, or was that after World War II?
I was doing World War II. Oh, yeah. When I went to Hollywood, Florida, there was a USO right there in town. So we visited there many times.
Any big name entertainers?
Gail Russell, do you remember? Gail Russell?
She was before my time.
How about some of these things here? Let's show them this. These are some of your medals, right?
Yeah.
These are his medals that he was given for his service. His
These
dog tag.
They're shells from Omaha Beach.
Shells from Omaha Beach, guys. Not, you know, where's Omaha Beach? Who knows where that is? Right on the coast, right? That's where we stormed the beaches.
Yeah.
We picked up shells as a souvenir.
This is the itinerary that we took in France. And I have pictures of all of my buddies, and that's
I got it.
That's my wife.
Awesome. So pictures throughout the war.
Yeah. That's the first, that's the best man.
Okay. This was his best man that he met. Remember he said his grade school friend
Yeah.
met him and became his best man. Destiny there. So some great pictures
Yeah.
that we have here. Is this you here?
Yeah, that's me. That's
Good
when
guy.
that's when we were in Florida. See, we had fun too, before we went over there. It wasn't all work.
That's right. So when you came back to the United States, I remember my dad telling me this story that there was a guy in his neighborhood, and when he came back, he was a kid, and everybody he would sit on the porch, and they would all come and want to see his medals and talk with him. He was a hero. Did you get that same kind of feeling when you
No,
came back?
I didn't.
No?
No, wasn't as bad as Vietnam coming back. They were
Right.
forgotten altogether.
Right.
We weren't forgotten.
Right.
But neighbors were glad to see me come back, but I had no
What do you-
parties or anything like that.
What do you think was the best, the biggest strength of yours that you had to use when you became a soldier in the war? What do you think was your best strength that you had? You know, we talk about this is the greatest generation in America of the people who fought in World War II, and I said that story how they would never say I can't.
Never give up, no.
So what would you say that's your what's your greatest?
Right, right. You have that in your mind all the time. No
And-
matter what the adversities were, you can't give up.
Right, and see, that's what I would try to explain to you guys, that you go back and there aren't many left. You know, Mr. McCormac is
10,000 a month die.
Right, right. But you think about those soldiers, and pretty much most of those soldiers became very successful in life because they had that drive, they had that instilled in them. Where do you think that came from? Where do you think that generation, your generation, why were they so driven. What do you think was different? Why did they have that?
I got to drive for my parents, I know that. That's where it began, right there. That's what's missing today. There's so many families, both out working, that spoils the family life.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think the Great Depression had an impact on your generation?
Oh, yeah.
And what do you think that did? Taught you what, the Great Depression?
Save your money.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it can go, you know, it all went, boy, people were going to banks trying to get their money.
Lot different. I go down to the, Mr. DeLeo and I go down to the Lost and Found in the gym to find something. I'll find $150 sneakers, $50 jerseys, you know.
Yeah,
They're not saving their money.
that's for
Or
sure.
their parents' money.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But, so different attitude, different time. When you grow up in that time period, you know, that teaches you some values that they carried over, and that's why they were able to do for us what they did. You know, because we're not sitting here today experiencing our freedoms had it not been for Mr. McCormack's generation. And they saved us. They didn't hesitate to go over there.
Yeah.
Mr. McCormack said he was ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that was the main reason why I wanted Mr. McCormack to come speak to you guys, is that, you know, and I defend you all the time. People always say that don't know kids, oh, this generation, they're lazy, but it's not true. You know, I know that there's potential within you guys, there's success within you guys, but sometimes we need a person from this generation like Mr. McCormack to rub off on us a little bit and to realize that we do have what they have, we just need it to be brought out. And, you know, great things are in front of you, and you always learn from those who come before you. And my generation learned from Mr. McCormack's generation. And then my generation teaches your generation. So it's gonna be different, but you have to understand that, you know, hard work and perseverance is what gets you places. So, you know, keep that in mind. And you know, as long as Mr. McCormack's willing to come in here and talk, he's gonna always be welcome here to speak to you guys. And he's got a lot more years. He does. He's got a lot more years left here.
Yeah, I'm playing part of 100 at 100.
He'll be here. I feel you are. I'm on, what time is this period? Okay, so we have some more time. Anybody else with questions for Mr. McCormack? All right, before we do go, Mr. McCormack, I know it's your birthday. I wanted to give you this from the class. So this is just a little token for us. I think it will look good on you. And then this here, go with that.
Oh,
That's
nice.
good. Thank you.
All right?
Thank you
That's
very
for
much.
you. For coming in for happy birthday.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll see you in it.
All right.
But any final questions before the other class leaves?
I just want to make a comment.
Yes.
First of all, Dad, thank you for your service.
Yes.
And also, Mr. Bristol, thank you for your opportunistic insight to approach him a year ago. You guys have a great teacher.
Yep.
I hated history.
Don't tell you that.
I really hated history when I was in high school. Don't hate history, that's how you learn. But the thing that impressed me is, Dad, your description of those planes over in the sky. And
I believe it.
that's amazing. And
Yeah.
the phrase, the war effort,
Yeah.
and the effort that it took to overcome those two nations, those relatively small nations back in the 40s,
Yeah.
Japan and Germany and Italy, and I often wonder if we would have that effort to be able to put forth today. But I do have a question, Dad. You were in D-Day, it's kind of a specific question. You were in D-Day, Day 6, and you mentioned as you approached the beach, there was still machine gun fire that you were encountering, because when we watch Saving Private
Yeah, we
Ryan,
know
we
that.
only see Day 1,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
You still had to overcome
Oh,
that.
yeah, they were still there. We only went a block or two off the beach as far as we could go. As far as we could walk that night, that's all. There was still fire.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we think of it, when we learn it, it's one day, June 6th, right?
Yeah.
But 6 days later,
Still the same.
Yeah. They're not just gonna hand it over.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta remember that they're pushing this way, the US and the Allied troops, and the Germans are trying to keep them that way.
Yeah.
Because
That
they
was
had
the bulge.
occupied France.
That was the bulge.
Right, right. And so, once they broke through at the bulge,
Yeah.
that was pretty much it, right?
Yeah, it was.
And the boos turned to cheers after that.
Right.
And then, you know, I didn't know this, I don't remember last year, and he was at Dachau. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and again, when I talked to Mr. McCormac the first time, he had said to me, I don't know if they want to hear anything, I don't really have much to say. Well, I mean, at Normandy, the Battle of the Bulge and Dachau, all experienced. And here to tell us about that. I just hope that someday you guys realize how lucky you were to be able to hear this from somebody firsthand. You know, I could tell you these stories, I could show you videos of this, and yes, you'd learn it, but to experience it from somebody who was there, I think is what's special about history, and something that allows you to keep memories a lot better than a video. And you know, we thank you for that, Mr. McCormac.
Quite welcome. Glad to be here.
This is, you know, something that I think they will remember. And you know, you are a hero to us.
That's great.
And we appreciate it,
Thank you.
and everything that you've done. Okay?
All right.
Anybody else?
Maybe one more.
Yes.
Dad, you talked about the bombs the night that you guys squirreled away in the bunker.
Yeah.
And you just sort of glanced over the fact that the bombs came closer, 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 and then they passed you.
Yeah.
Tell us what was going through your mind at that point. Because that wasn't just a one-night experience, correct?
Could be the last night, we didn't know. We were getting closer all the time. Just wait for the next one. Oh, that one passed me. Lucky.
What did it feel like, sitting in the bunker?
Oh, tight for one thing. But, scared.
Would you-
Vibrations?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you can feel that.
Would you show fear to others or no?
No.
Interesting.
But you shook.
Yeah. But you don't want anybody else to know you. And everybody was scared.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody showed it.
Oh, right.
That's how you get through it.
Yeah, right.
Powerful. Okay. Anybody else?
Grandpa, can you tell them what it was like growing up without running water in your house?
Oh.
Because you didn't have running water in your bathtub. You didn't have a freezer. These are things that
You
most
didn't-
of us
Yeah,
are
the
not.
outhouse,
And
that's
then
what it
to
was.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, now.
Were you in Philadelphia growing up?
Yeah. Kensington.
Yeah. Yeah.
There we had the outhouse. And when we had company, we had relatives coming from Virginia. And anytime they came, I had to sleep in a bathtub. There was no running water in the bathtub. It was galvanized tin in
Yeah.
there. You just laid in there, put a blanket in there. A good night's sleep.
All Irish neighborhood?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my dad grew up in Hell's Kitchen.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was all Irish.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, that I had the
We
story.
had one block, right around the corner. The whole block was Polish, except the one in the middle was Irish.
Yeah.
I have another one. Can you tell them how much your honeymoon cost in New York?
Great.
$6 a night. $6 a night.
You were living large.
Oh, yeah. I sent a check for $15 to just to hold the place.
Right.
That was it. $15.
I wouldn't get you a drink today.
Yeah, right.
That's good. All
And your mortgage, Dad, what was your,
$12 a month.
$12 a month.
$12.12.
How much was
wow.
your first house?
That was my first house.
How much was your first house?
2,500.
Oh, my. Wow, you were rich.
We never paid 24 either. It was always 12.
That's it.
And spread around. I had more than this children.
Yeah.
There's only a few of them there.
You had to make it, you barely made that one.
Right.
Yeah,
2 or 3 jobs.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's a part of it, you know, that's part of that generation. They worked and they didn't have any excuses.
That's part of life.
Yeah.
Dad, were you engaged to Mom before you left for the war,
No.
or
I
after?
engaged while I was overseas. My sister Marie bought the ring for me and gave it to her.
How romantic.
What, you mean you weren't there?
Uh,
You weren't there to
No.
propose?
So you never got down on
I wasn't allowed to come home.
So you were hoping when you got home it was still good.
Oh, yeah. And she waited 3 years.
Wow, that's good. And 70, almost 1 day shy, right?
Yeah,
That's great. Great stuff.
a good life.
Yes, yes, you have. Okay.
Best family in the world, right back
Now
here.
you can tell, you can definitely tell. You know, they're all here,
Yep.
which is great. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, guys.
I'm not guaranteeing it anymore.
Yes, you are. I'm guaranteed.
Okay.
I feel good about it.
All right.
All right.
Hope it's the same story though.
That's all right. Story every day.
Same war, same
Different
story.
kids, same story.
What, were you asked?
That's the beauty of teaching. See, I tell the same story.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too, so.
Yeah.
It'd
be
nice
nice
for
for
us
us
back.
Sometimes it gets better as time goes on. My story gets
Embellish a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It always changes.